Everybody, welcome to Card Talk, a Lord of the Rings podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the living card game. And I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride, and today we are discussing Hirluin the Fair, the leadership hero from the Stewart Sphere of the from the Adventure Pack cycle of the Against the Shadows. He is an 8 cost, 1 willpower, 1 attack power, 1 defense power, 4 hit points, outlands hero. David, what are your thoughts on Hirluin?
I have to say that generally I was disappointed, not specifically with Hirluin, but with the outlands trait. I felt like the game designer spent a lot of time during that particular cycle. What is it?
Against the Shadows?
Against the Shadows, right? It started with Heirs of Numenor. And
Yep.
so, and they spent all this time developing a new kind of deck archetype. They had a hero for Outlands, somebody that could bring out more Outlands characters regardless of the sphere, which is what Hirluin does. And then they had some cards from every sphere that were Outlands. It seemed like it was going to be another archetype, maybe not completely well developed, but it seems like after the Heirs of Numenor or the Against the Shadow cycle, it seems like that trait just fell by the wayside. I'm not sure if there's been any Outlands card printed since then, and for me, that was disappointing because I kind of put together an Outlands deck ready for the new cycles to come out, the new expansions and all these things to have some more Outlands, and it never did. And I was like, okay. And so Outlands is maybe a good supporting cast, but to run an Outlands deck that's pure Outlands, I don't know. It's just so. The Outlands in general was disappointing for me, and then Hirluin himself, I'm just not a fan of having a hero that is 1, 1, and 1 in terms of stats. And 4 hit points, yeah, that's a bunch of hit points. That's more than the hobbits. That's on the order of the elves and some of the dwarves. But it's just with stat line of 1, 1, 1. You just can't do anything. If I had a choice of picking something with higher defense or higher hit points, if I had to choose, I would always pick higher defense because, and I think I've said this before, and I know that you and I talk about this all the time off the air, but, is that if you have a choice between defense and hit points are like a one-time deal. You get them one time, and then once you use them, they're done. So, unless you have healing or something like that, defense comes back every turn again and again and again. And so 1 defense isn't a lot. And so to trade, 1 or 2, well, probably not 2 of those hit points, but to trade 1 of those hit points for a defense point would change his stats enormously for me. So that's my initial thought with Hirluin. What do you think of the guy?
Well, when I first started playing with Hirluin, it was on the OCTGN, and at that point I had access to pretty much all the Outlands cards up except for the Men of the West, which was later released at the end of the cycle with Assault on Osgiliath.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the idea of Outlands. I like that Hirluin was able to pull out his comrades like the Warrior of Lossinar, the Knights of Swan, the Antlerless Herdsman, which all give boosts.
The Hunter of Lamadon. And...
yeah, then you've got the Etia Swordsman,
right,
and Forlong.
Right.
But all of these got a boost from each other. It wasn't, say, each Outlands ally or each Outlands hero. It wasn't. It was just Outlands character. So they all boosted each other in some way.
Right, which was awesome. I love that they all gave each other stuff.
But the problem was, since the end of the Heirs of Numenor, they haven't went back and said, right, well, we've got this developed so far, why don't we progress it and make it an overall deck type, an archetype, like you have for the dwarves, like you now have for the hobbits, like you have for the Sylvan elves, like you have for the Noldor elves. You can each make a deck around just those cards. Where,
Yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily want it to be a a super well developed like those archetypes. Just something a little more. Like
well,
it just seemed like it just went off for me.
well, that's what they did with the Dunedain. They introduced cards at the beginning of the cycle and didn't really develop them until past the Voice of Isengard and into Angmar Awakens. That's when Dunedain really came out and started to have some sort of archetype. It would be the Angmar Awakens adventure cycle that
Right.
Dunedain really began to shine. But even at the beginning, they introduced Hobbit characters, but they didn't get anything until the Black Riders.
About Hirluin, the problem is, as a general hero, he's not very good. We could talk about Outlands all the time if we wanted to, but I think that the hero himself, when I talked about, I'll bring this up however much you're not going to like it, but when we talked about Thalin was a dwarf, but he didn't necessarily have to fit into a dwarf deck. He had an ability that could be used. He was a decent hero down across the board. I think that, there was a lot of flexibility here, and I think that Hirluin, the way that he's set up, gives him no flexibility except to use him for his ability in the Outlands deck. There's a lot of other characters that give you the ranged ability, give you better stats, maybe not better hit points, but again, I already said that I'd rather have defense than hit points to some degree.
I agree with what you're saying. Hirluin outside of an Outlands deck does not work. Yes, he's in the leadership sphere, so he gives you access to likes of Steward of Gondor or the mark of the Dunedain marks, the Dunedain warnings that, yes, all increase your attack or defense or willpower or whatever else you want it for. But his base stat line, other than his hit points, are mediocre. If I'm actually running a deck and I'm looking for somebody with ranged, I'll either go for Haldia or Argalad or even Legolas, rather than spend maybe 1 or 2 or 3 points more for better stat line without having to pay for it with resources that I could be using to get out allies. Whereas without the Outlands trait being fully developed, it isn't worth it at this point in time. Now, I've run an Outlands deck, running all of the Outlands cards, plus a few others.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked for a time, but taking it up against some of the earlier quests or some of the later quests, and it just doesn't really work very well.
Right. You have to use it as like a support, like you said, a supporting archetype.
Exactly.
Now, when I did run my Outlands deck, I did enjoy running it with Elrond, because Elrond, you can use his resources to bring out any allies in any sphere as well. So, with using Elrond, which has a high threat of 13, and then Hirluin, which is 8, so, you're kind of in the middle there with 21 for 2, and then if you pick another lower starting threat, you're below 30, which is kind of my mental magic number. Fans of the show know that I like low starting threat, but Elrond was who I paired Hirluin with, and that also then gave me access to the healing that I needed with Elrond's ability, that it kept Elrond healthy and stuff like that. But that was about the only hero combination that made sense in my own book.
When I was running the official Outlands deck as I've ran it, I was running with Theodred and Aragorn, mainly for the early turn defending with Aragorn.
You were doing it with the leadership version.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I could quest and then ready and defend,
Right.
while still having all the resource generation and attaching all that onto Hirluin just so I could play the allies. And it worked for a time, as I've said. Going up against some of the Heirs of Numenor, against the Shadows packs, likes of Encounter at Amon Din and which one's the one where they're going through the forest against Ganbury Gan?
The Druidan Forest.
That's the one. And going against the Druidan Forest with me Outlands, I was able to do fairly successfully. But some of the more tougher quests, where you really require to think about how you play,
right,
it wasn't as effective. Anything else to say about Hirluin other than his fabulous artwork? Which is probably the only thing he's got going for it at the minute.
Yeah, I think that his artwork is pretty stunning, but yeah, I'm not a fan of Hirluin. Yeah, what do you ring him?
Well, with 1 being the one ring to rule them all, and 10 being absolute garbage, I'm ringing him at a 7 rings.
Wow. Why 7?
Mainly because of the fact that I have had some good use out of him, but I've also, I think the trait needs to be developed more before I can give him a decent ring system. I ring him on the same lines as Gloin. I like the fact that he's there, but I don't use him. Whereas Gloin, I just couldn't see the value in the hero version, which you and I have discussed many a times.
Right.
So what about yourself?
Well, I know that I just don't see Hirluin being of any use right now in the current card pool. There's too many good leadership heroes. There's too many good other archetypes to run, and so I have to give him a 9. The only redeeming factor about the guy is he's ranged, and he has 4 hit points. But other than that, I am not picking Hirluin out of. If I'm lining up heroes to choose, and I need access to leadership. Hirluin isn't the leader isn't the leadership hero that I'm picking. I'm choosing somebody else. That's all there is. I'm picking Glowin, right? So.
Yeah, well, like I say, I can see he's got some redeeming factors because he does give us access to like the Outlands trait, so that I can boost him if I am going to run him in, like, say, if I need range and leadership, I might consider it, but it's not going to be the key factor. If I can get away with, say, running Legolas in Theodred, I will.
So join us next time as we tackle the Gondorian Spearman, a core set ally from the Tactic Sphere. Have a great day.